You're listening to The Pilot's Portfolio, formerly called the Pilot Money Podcast. To learn more about the name change, join us in Season 2.
When you were listening to the previous episode, did it make you nervous? Did the idea of not contributing any of your own dollars towards your own financial future and your own financial success, did that make you nervous? If you raised your hand and said, yes, that made me nervous, I'm going to say good for you. When you think about not contributing any of your own money and trusting that the airline wouldn't make any changes that would negatively impact the remainder of your career, it should have made you nervous. This industry, as we all know, it's ripe for change. Things are changing all the time.
You're listening to the Pilot Money Podcast, the show dedicated to guiding professional pilots towards a future of financial success and stability. Fly along with your host, Timothy P. Pope, as he provides financial planning insights and answers to your burning questions and dives into real-life stories from fellow pilots who share their successes and cautionary tales. The Pilot Money Podcast takes off now.
Well, welcome again, everybody, to the Pilot Money Podcast. Timothy P. Pope here, certified financial planner, specializing in the planning needs of the professional pilot. I'm excited to have you along for this episode. This is a part 2 episode to episode 13 that we did, where we explored the question, hey, can you retire on your company's direct contribution? Folks have been asking, you've been wondering about it. Direct contributions, most major airlines, 17%, scheduled to go up to 18%. The airlines have also adopted the market-based cash balance plan. So, you've got to be thinking like, do I need to contribute any of my own money, right? And so in episode 13, we looked at that question, and you'll recall the answers, it really came down to it depends. And what it depended on, in large part, was how much time you had left with the company, right? And so we broke the remainder of your career down to a 20-year career, or 30-year career, and a 40-year career. So I would encourage you, if you're just joining us and you haven't heard that episode, pause, go listen to episode 13. This episode is going to make a lot more sense if you've got that one as a foundation. So in today's episode, we are going to continue that conversation, and we're going to look at a few things, right? But just to remind everybody, these are the assumptions that we've used. Delta 2026 pay rates, flying the A320, okay? You're going to spend the first 6 years of your career as an FO, then you're going to upgrade to captain, and you're going to stay in the left seat from there. You are flying, in this case, min guarantee your entire career. When we looked at it, we did min guarantee or the average line value, which we took from Kit Darby's work. You can grab that from episode 2 in the show notes and listen to that, or you can go to kitdarby.com. In both places, you might be able to get a free copy of his analysis there. So in this, we've really only looked at the min guarantee because it's all proportional. And so if you're successful on min guarantee, you're successful flying more than that because we're looking at savings on a percentage basis there. This analysis does not include future contract raises, premium trips. It doesn't include per diems, profit sharings that may be paid out to you, Social Security. It doesn't look at retirement income from the military or any other pension sources that you may have. So essentially, in the first analysis, we said, hey, look, can you allow the company to contribute its NEC? And in this analysis, it's 18%. And then you just spend every dollar that you get. And can you maintain the same standard of living? And we described that as being able to command the same take-home pay, average take-home pay there. The other assumption that we want folks to be aware of is we use an 8% compounded annual growth rate. Those are the assumptions. If you want to catch yourself up to speed on the methodology of how we figured out your after-tax and your effective tax rate and so forth, go back and listen to the previous episode. So we're going to jump right in. I want to ask you a question, though, before we look at results, is when you were listening to the previous episode, did it make you nervous? Did the idea of not contributing any of your own dollars towards your own financial future and your own financial success, did that make you nervous? If you raised your hand and said, yes, that made me nervous, I'm going to say good for you. It should have made you nervous when you think about not contributing any of your own money and trusting that the airline wouldn't make any changes that would negatively impact the remainder of your career. This industry, as we all know, it's ripe for change. Things are changing all the time. The other thing, it may have made you nervous where we said, hey, we're using an 8% compounding annual growth rate. And sure, when we look at the long-term returns of the stock market, they are above 8%. And that's going to be their gross returns before inflation, right? And before tax. But if you said, well, I'd be more comfortable if I used a more conservative number, maybe a 5% number, that would have been fair. The reason that I say a more conservative number may be more attractive is because typically when we look at the long-term returns of the stock market, yes, they're usually above 8%. However, those returns a lot of times go back to say maybe 1926 or right at the end of the 1920s. So if it goes back to 1926 and it comes up to present day, it's usually the year before the current year. So in our case, 1926 to 2023, that's going to be 97 years of market returns smoothed out over time into a nice little compounded annual growth rate. The reality is that if you were to peel back the layers, there can be and often are extended periods below average market returns, right? By extended periods, I mean 10 years or 15 years of below average market conditions. So if you've got 20 years left between now and retirement, a 10 to 15 year, let's call it a drought, a market drought, that's 50 to 75% of your remaining time horizon. If you've got 30 years left, 10 to 15 years of below average market returns could be, 33 to 50% of your time horizon. So what's my point? My point is that most investors, we look at 100-year or close to 100-year average stock market return. And we say, oh yeah, that's going to happen to me. But your investing time horizon is probably not 100 years. If you've started investing, let's say 30 to 35 years old, you've got about 30 to 35 years to take you to retirement age of age 65, and then another 25 to 30 years on the backside of retirement. So realistically, your investing time horizon is about 55 to 60 years. That's a little better than half of the time of the long-term averages are quoted from. Or if you start at 20 years old, now we're getting to 65 to 70 years. Now we're getting a little closer to that long-term average. And so those numbers may be more appropriate for you. But what if you're starting at, say, 40 years old? And your investing time horizon is 25 years to get to retirement and then another 20 to 25 years after that. And so realistically, your investing time horizon is 45 to 50 years. That's less than half of the time that the long-term averages are quoted from. So why does this matter? Well, number one, we talked about there could be extended periods of below average market conditions. So the market when you retire does matter. Inflation when you retire does matter, right? So that's number one. Those things you can't control. But number two, this matters because usually we want to do everything that we can to tilt the odds in our favor, right? So practically, should I contribute more money when I can towards my future financial success? Probably. Or should I aim to have my portfolio hit that critical mass so I can know that I can withstand unplanned events and still be okay? Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Or maybe should I roll up my sleeves and learn the simple things that I can do to increase the longevity of my portfolio? Like, which account types are available to me? Which ones should I be using and when? Where should I put certain investments to minimize tax drag or to maximize the tax benefits? Like, should I do that? Absolutely, you should. So we want to do everything that we can to tilt the odds in our favor. The other thing is it may have made you nervous when you realize, wow, if I just let the company contribute their non-elective contribution into my 401k, I won't be able to touch any of that money until retirement age. And that means I'm going to have to forfeit financial flexibility. So most of your pre-retirement spending needs are going to be determined based off your paycheck, which is going to be determined on how much the company is flying you, which you can't really control how much the company's flying you, right? So maybe, I talked to a FedEx pilot right now who wishes maybe they were flying a little bit more so they can do the things that they enjoy with the people they love. So setting yourself up to have flexibility so everything's not tied up into retirement accounts that have tax and penalty associated with it if you touch them at the wrong time. So let's talk about the results here because a spoiler alert, if you haven't listened to episode 13, what you'll realize in episode 13 is if you have a 20-year time horizon left and you plan to just let the company's NEC take you to retirement, that distribution rate that you'll need in retirement to maintain the same level of spending is not going to work, right? Not for a 20 to 30 year retirement, because that's between like 12 and 13% in terms of distributions. So your next natural question probably is, okay, well, how much do I need to bring to the table? How much should I be contributing to my retirement if I can't rely on the company contributions? And what we did in this episode is we broke it up into, okay, let's say the impact of you contributing 5% of your money, 10%, 15%, and 20%, in addition to the company's non-elective contributions. We kept everything else the same, all the other underlying assumptions. Of course, the average take-home pay changed because now you're investing the dollars, so you're not getting to spend those dollars, so we didn't count that. But we used the same methodology to figure out payroll tax, your federal tax, your effective tax rate. And of course, we left out state tax because you could live anywhere. And, if you live in outside of the states that don't have a state tax, state income tax, then who knows what your rate is. So we left that up for you to do a little homework there. What we see with a 20-year career, somebody who is contributing 5% of their own money to either a 401k or any other investment vehicle, your average take-home pay is $189,000 over that 20 years, and your distribution rate to sustain that average take-home pay was 9%. Okay, still a distribution rate that we are not comfortable with for a 20 to 30-year retirement. The 10% contribution resulted in $175,700, essentially, average take-home pay, and a 7% distribution rate. So we're starting to see a little pattern. Hey, the more I contribute, yes, the less average take-home pay that I have, but also the smaller of a distribution rate that I'll need in retirement. At 15%, we're going to see $162,000 in terms of average take-home pay over that time period and a 5% distribution rate there. And then it took us 20% of my own money over that 20-year time period to get a 4% distribution rate, which, hey, we like a 4% distribution rate because that should be able to withstand a 30-year retirement without the risk of running out of money. And then the average take-home pay there was $149,000. So that's the result of if you've got 20 years left, so you're at 45, you're feeling like, hey, I'm behind the 8 ball. I really need to bring some dollars to the table to invest. And so one, you're looking at 20%, and you're also hoping that the markets will give you an average 8% compound annual growth rate. So some of those things, risk tolerance can impact that growth rate. Obviously, market cycles will impact that growth rate, and then your ability to save. Let's take a look at the 30-year career. So with a 30-year career, if you contributed 5% over that 30 years, your average take-home after taxes, benefits, payroll, and you name it, is about $200,000 per year, $199,000. And then your distribution rate is 4%. If you contributed 10%, we see a take-home pay of $185,000, but a distribution rate of 3%. And then both 15% and 20%, we see a distribution rate of 2%, meaning that, hey, we can maintain our standard of living. We're looking at a 2% distribution rate. We're really not concerned about running out of money in retirement. For a 15% contribution, the average take-home pay was $171,000. And for a 20% contribution, the average take-home pay was $157,000. So with that, let's talk about the differences there. The first thing that you can see that jumps off the page at me, and if you were to do this analysis yourself, it would jump off the page at you. But wow, can you see the tremendous difference that an additional 10 years of compound annual growth has on your portfolio? The message here is to start early. If it's early for you, to keep it up. There's going to be some point where you may consider, hey, maybe I want to take my foot off the gas, right? And that's cool. Like the portfolio can stand that. But you want to start early because, between the 20 and the 30-year career, at the 20-year, if you have 20 years remaining, you had to put 20% of your contributions in your 401k for all of that time to get a 4% distribution rate versus a 30-year career, you only had to do 5% to get a 4% distribution rate. Also, the 20-year career, you had to do 20% and you had to deal with a lower average take-home pay of $149,000 versus the 30-year career, you could do 5% and enjoy a higher average take-home pay of $199,000, so $200,000. And so I think the message here is you start early, you allow the market to do most of the work for you, and then almost at all stages of the game, you're going to have more dollars for your enjoyment. And so, compounding returns work. It's just having the discipline to be able to allow them the time to work. So another take-home message here is to control what you can control. And life and the airlines, there's going to be so many things outside of your control. Right now, we've got airlines and the public's will to travel is strong, but we've got manufacturers that have some issues. We're thinking about Boeing, Pratt & Whitney, right, that are leaving fleets grounded. Also, we've got airlines that are stuck in negotiations. And so guess what? Companies not flying them that much. Also, they lost some contracts as well. So these are things that you as the pilot do not control, but they certainly are things that you as the pilot are going to have to navigate and you're going to have to live through. And so just having more dollars that are accessible that can help you get through slow times can certainly decrease that financial stress, increase your financial clarity and your financial position, and then allow you to do the things that you enjoy with the people that you love. So I hope you enjoyed this part 2 of the episode. Send us your questions, pilotmoneypodcast@ceterainvestors.com. We are working on another Q&A episode. So if you're able to get us any questions that you have that you would like our thoughts on, let us know. If you've got thoughts on this episode and how we've done the work in episode 13 or episode 17, let us know. But look, thanks for following along on the Pilot Money Podcast, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining this episode of Pilot's Portfolio. If you found this information helpful, spread the word and share it with a pilot buddy. Or if you have questions and there's something that you would like to hear discussed on the show, send us an email. You can find the address in the show notes. For those of you who are ready to learn how we help professional pilots with their financial planning needs, schedule an appointment. Until next time, keep the shiny side up, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Pilot's Portfolio is hosted by Timothy P. Pope. Timothy P. Pope is principal owner of 360 Aviation Advisors. 360 Aviation Advisors is a registered investment advisory firm regulated by the state of North Carolina in accordance and compliance to the securities laws and regulations. 360 Aviation Advisors does not render or offer to render personalized investment or tax advice through Pilot's Portfolio. The information provided is for informational purposes only and may not be suitable for all investors and does not constitute financial, tax, investment, or legal advice. All investments involve a degree of risk, including the risk of loss.